what's up? Sinisa, Super Bad Estrada here, and I just want to give a huge special shout out to the relay. Thank you so much for all of the continuous support, and thank you for all of the support during and after and before every single fight.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Later on this week on Friday in Scotland, reigning WBA junior middleweight champion Hannah Rankin will defend her newly obtained WBA title against
Very experienced Mexican slugger Alejandra Ayala.
It's not exactly a foregone conclusion that Hannah Rankin wins. I am going with Hannah Rankin to win a points decision. I think she can do enough in her own neck of the woods at the Hydro Arena in Scotland. I think she can do enough to win the fight.
When on points.
Both girls have won some fights, have lost some fights. You know, Hannah Rankin, she's been in there with some of the best and brightest fighters at or around these weights. Something very similar is true of Alejandra Ayala. Alejandra Ayala, who's been in there with Canada's own Marie-Eve Dicaire 2 times, lost the decision both times. She was in there with Savannah Marshall in 2018. She was stopped by Savannah Marshall. They have a common opponent between them in Savannah, both.
Yeah, both Hannah and Alejandra have fought Savannah Marshall.
Savannah Marshall, who just so happens to have stopped them both. Now they are facing each other. I will say to the eye, Phoenix Ayala is somewhat of a harder puncher than Hannah Rankin is. She's got a recorded 8 knockouts to Hannah Rankin's 2. In terms of age and experience level, there's really not that much between them. Alejandra's 33 years old to Hannah Rankin, who's 31. Alejandra sports a professional record, 14 wins, 5 losses with no draws.
8 knockouts to Hannah Rankin's 11 wins, 5 losses with 2 knockouts.
And as stated, it's not a foregone conclusion that Hannah beats Alejandra. It's not a foregone conclusion, though it is the logical choice and the safe choice, because Hannah Rankin does have home field advantage, and with that in mind, she can be prolific enough, aggressive enough, do enough with home field advantage that perhaps she wins a points decision. Hannah's not a big puncher, so I don't see her knocking out Alejandra. And while Alejandra Ayala might be somewhat of a stronger puncher than Hannah, Hannah's tough. She's a tough nut to crack. It took for Savannah Marshall to knock her out at middleweight. I don't think Alejandra Ayala packs the same punch that Savannah Marshall does up there at middleweight and super middleweight. Those things in mind, and that being said, I see Hannah Rankin winning a points decision on Friday at the Hydro. Beyond that, she means to challenge Natasha Jonas, this division's newly crowned WBO champion, in a unification match. She's got to get past Alejandra first, but as stated, I think she can. I think she's going to do it.
I imagine a fight between Natasha and Hannah would take place on Sky Sports.
And I look at that as a more intriguing fight than this one, because Hannah Rankin is far more experienced at or around these weights than Natasha Jonas is, but Natasha Jonas has the amateur pedigree, the amateur background that Hannah Rankin doesn't have. In a fight between them, I'd say that Hannah would have durability on her side. She would. She's a tough nut to crack, like I said, but Natasha would have speed and punch placement.
Natasha is naturally smaller, but she's also naturally faster.
That's a tasty fight, and both fighters want it. You know, Hannah Rankin wants that Natasha Jonas fight, and Natasha Jonas herself, she echoes that sentiment. She wants that fight with Hannah Rankin. Beyond that, you've got Cecilia Brækhus, the welterweight division's former undisputed champion, moving up in weight to take on Sweden's own Patricia Bivol, the newly crowned WBC champion at 154 pounds. And depending on what happens with that, the entire landscape at 154 will have changed. Will the experience of the veteran fighter, former champion Cecilia Brækhus, be enough to overcome the unbeaten up-and-comer, the unbeaten champion, I should say, Patricia Bivol? She's a big, strong girl.
But Cecilia has experience and will have home field advantage.
Buckets upon buckets of experience and home field advantage, because this is supposed to be going down in Cecilia's native Colombia.
Cecilia is known as a Norwegian national, but her place of birth was actually Colombia.
And that is where this fight's supposed to be going down. We talked about that here on the channel, how she's back with Jonathan Banks, and how I think she has a better rapport with Jonathan than what she tried to have with Abel Sanchez. I never thought that was a good fit, so it's encouraging. It's all looking encouraging for Cecilia. We'll see how that shakes out. In the mean in between time this Friday, Hannah Rankin will attempt to hang on to her portion.
Friday the 13th, huh?
That's spooky. We'll see who ends up having a run of bad luck. Will it be Hannah Rankin, the defending champion, or will it be Mexico's own Alejandra Ayala? I like Hannah Rankin's chances, but I could be wrong. This is a live one. It's not a foregone conclusion.
She can't look past Alejandra.
She's got to stay switched on, because there really are a lot of opportunities on the other side of this fight. You got the Jonas fight that we just talked about, and you got a potential fight with the winner of Bergult versus Breakus.
We'll see what happens on Friday.
In other news, per tweet from Mike Coppinger, the WBC has ordered a lightweight title eliminator between Ryan Garcia and Isaac Pitbull Cruz, per a letter obtained by ESPN. If no deal is struck, a purse bid on June 14th will be ordered. Title held by Heaven Denis, who meets George Kambosos Jr. for the Undisputed Championship on June 5th. Story coming, and we've been there and done that when it comes to this conversation.
Yeah.
And the same obstacles,
Yeah.
the same issues,
Yeah.
they're still there. So I don't know if this fight happens, though I would like to see it happen because it's an interesting clash of styles. The come-forward pressure, punching power of Isaac Cruz versus the boxing and speed.
Ryan Garcia looked like shit with a manual to go.
He did, but he was coming off a long stint of inactivity and a surgery, whereas Isaac Cruz, he looked quite formidable against Yuriorkis Gamboa, but what does looking formidable against Yuriorkis Gamboa really mean in today's day and age? He did handle him better,
He did.
much more abruptly than Gervonta Davis and Devin Haney. Devin Haney decisioned Gamboa, whereas Gervonta Davis needed 12 rounds to stop him.
Isaac Cruz stopped him in 5.
Less than half the time it took Gervonta Davis to stop that same Yuriorkis Gamboa, who was standing on one leg, just one good leg. He had a torn Achilles tendon. So I wouldn't read too much into that because Isaac already fought Gervonta Davis and already lost to Gervonta Davis. So putting Isaac in there with a Gamboa is little more than smoke, mirrors, and window dressing. So what that he stopped Gamboa in 5 rounds?
He still dropped the decision to Gervonta Davis.
The whole point of matching Isaac against the Gamboa is to cross-compare performances with other fighters that have fought Yuriorkis Gamboa. But he already fought Gervonta Davis before that, so if he stops Gamboa before Davis did...
Doesn't matter. He already lost to Gervonta Davis, so fighting Gamboa is pointless.
Pointless excursion, a pointless endeavor. You have to remember what happened between Team Cruz and Team Garcia. Oscar De La Hoya publicly stated that they offered Isaac Cruz $1 million to come over to their side of things and do the fight, to which Sean Gibbons replied they wanted to do it on Showtime.
Golden Boy's not sending Ryan Garcia to Showtime to be content for them.
Sean Gibbons knows that. He knows that just as much as I or you. So when he asks for it, he's asking for it with no actual expectation to see the fight made, i.e., it's a non-starter, and that's just your way of sabotaging that fight because you don't want to send Isaac to a Golden Boy show. You don't want him to fight on the DAZN platform. You want to kill this fight and find something else for him to do, which you did. Instead of headlining with Ryan, you had him in a co-main with Gamboa.
Will an order from the WBC make a difference?
I don't know. I mean, Ryan Garcia's walked away from world title opportunities before. He could have fought Devin Haney if he wanted to, but he didn't. You know, after he beat Luke Campbell, that was a WBC final eliminator to crown a mandatory challenger for Devin Haney's belt. And Ryan, he wasn't interested. So the WBC ordering this fight, what's it really mean? And you think about Isaac's handlers. They walked away from a Ryan Garcia fight before. Even if Isaac himself wants to fight with Ryan, and even if Isaac himself isn't afraid of fighting little old Ryan Garcia, that doesn't mean his handlers are going to let him do it.
Oscar, do you think the other side will want to make a deal, though?
No,
Why not?
because it's Al Heyman. That's the bottom line. He'll do anything to block that fight or not make it happen, but it would be unfair to Cruz because Cruz wants the fight. And now that the WBC ordered it, I think it's a great thing because now there's like nowhere to run, there's nowhere to hide. Not that Cruz is hiding, but
You know, Isaac Cruz, he ain't the A-side to Ryan Garcia.
Maybe Isaac, the fighter, has no problem acquiescing to being the B-side to Ryan Garcia because he, as a fighter, is confident that he can take him out. Maybe Isaac ain't the problem. Maybe it's Isaac's handlers. Maybe they're the obstacle that needs to be overcome. Maybe they're the problem. They don't want to send him over to a Golden Boy promotion show. And if these guys can't reach a deal within that grace period, it goes to a purse bid in June. Does Golden Boy Promotions really have what it takes to win a purse bid?
You know, this ain't Top Ranker Matchroom we're talking about.
Golden Boy Promotions hasn't been quite the same since Canelo Alvarez parted ways with them. Do they really have what it takes to win a purse bid in this situation, if that's what it comes to? Ryan Garcia himself says, "I'm so excited. This fight just got ordered by the WBC, so little chance this man escapes from his fate when he enters the ring with me. Let's go, Pitbull. Roof time. Time to make this happen. Don't do anything weird. Let's give the fans what they want.
Did he say roof?
What, like a rooftop?
No, like a door.
Don't do anything weird, he says. Listen, it's nice that the WBC ordered this fight. And for what it's worth, if they could get this fight over the line, there might be significant commercial value in it. Because in this fight, you have a Mexican national versus an American fighter of Mexican heritage. All the makings of a fight that could move the needle with the Chicano fans. There's actually reason enough there, enough financial value, that you should do the fight. But given the politics of boxing and those political boundary lines, there's a chance it doesn't happen.
Order from the WBC or no order from the WBC?
Isaac Cruz has the option of facing the winner or the loser of Davis versus Romero, that upcoming lightweight fight. Ryan Garcia, he's got Jojo Diaz on his side of things, and that's a fight they were supposed to have before. It's a fight they could end up having if things fall through with this.
I mean, this order from the WBC might be breaking news.
But much about the situation between these two teams and the obstacles they'd have to overcome in order to do this fight, much about that situation hasn't actually changed. And I don't know that an order from the WBC makes it any better, because the whole idea is wanting to do this fight so that you can face the winner of Haney versus Kambosos.
The winner of that fight is on the top-ranked side of things.
Do you think Isaac Cruz's handlers want him going over to top rank? Do you think Ryan Garcia's handlers, do you think they want that?
Never mind that Haney versus Kambosos could end up being a two-fight situation.
So yeah, I question just how bad Ryan Garcia wants the winner of that fight. I question how bad Isaac Cruz and his team, I question how much they want the winner of that fight. I question all these things because there are obvious political boundary lines associated with facing the winner of that fight, depending on who the winner of that fight ends up being and how long it takes for that engagement to end, because it could end up being two fights.
How bad do they want it? Do they want it bad enough to where they're willing to fight each other?
So that whoever ends up winning between them can corner the winner of that fight, because that would be the whole point. That would be the whole purpose in participating in this eliminator. How bad does Team Garcia want it? How bad does Team Cruz want it? We'll find out.
Yeah, if they actually make this fight.
If you win on Saturday as expected, it's clear that you want Dimitri Bivol next.
I'm going to win. I'm going to win, and of course, people want to see that fight, and I want to give the fans they deserve it.
Gilberto, were you surprised by the dominance of Bivol?
I was surprised. I thought it, honestly, I was a little sad because Canelo, he lost, and at the end of the day, we're Mexican, we support each other, and I was really surprised.
So would you say, though, that you're a real light heavyweight, though?
Yes.
You're a lot taller, a lot longer. It'd be a tougher fight for Dimitri?
Yep. People know about that fight, and Dimitri knows that I'm bigger than him, and maybe that's why maybe he wanna 68. Fight Canelo, but I mean it's a great opportunity for Bivol to make that fight, but I think he can beat Canelo again.
Gilbert, final question for me. You've been with Julian Chua for about 5 fights. What's that been like, and what's the biggest difference you think he's made with you as a fighter?
Well, we've been working so hard in the gym, and I think the intelligence that he has and that I have too in the ring, and we put together is a great combination.
You heard what Zurdo said. He thinks that Dimitri's willing to move down to 168 pounds to take on Canelo Alvarez again because he knows that Zurdo Ramirez is a much bigger guy than Canelo Alvarez, a natural 175-pound fighter. He feels like he's being avoided, whereas according to Dimitri, it's not his goal to have a rematch with Canelo. He says, I have a goal to be undisputed at light heavyweight. I'll give him a rematch, of course, if he wants. He moved up and gave me an opportunity. I'll give him an opportunity. But Dimitri's making it clear. He wants to become his division's undisputed champion. And for what it's worth, Dimitri Bivol, in the buildup of this fight, I said it. I didn't get the sense that this is a guy who's just looking for a payday, that this is a guy who's just looking for a check. This guy struck me as a competitor, a guy who likes his chances. He's been a straight shooter the whole time. And I feel like I can take him at his word, that it is his goal to become the light heavyweight division's undisputed champion. A part of that is hanging on to his belt. in order to be able to unify it. Unify it with the winner of Beterbiev versus Smith.
Part of that is hanging onto his belt and satisfying his mandatory so he can do that.
This weekend, Zurdo Ramirez is going to be returning to action against Dominic Bosel. There are actually 2 cards happening this weekend. Ramirez versus Bosel and the undisputed junior middleweight rematch between Jermel Charlo and Brian Castaño. We'll talk about that fight in another video. For now, the winner of Ramirez versus Bosel becomes the mandatory challenger for Dimitri Bivol. So if it is Dimitri's aspiration to eventually become an undisputed champion at this weight, he's got to take care of the winner of this fight first, and he might have to.
I think Zurdo's gonna knock out Dominic.
Afterwards, I think Oscar's going to apply pressure on the WBA to order that fight. Order the fight between Zurdo and Dimitri Bivol, at which point, Dimitri, he's going to have to make a choice. Does he decide to keep chasing around Canelo Alvarez because he says that he isn't, or will he satisfy his mandatory challenger in Zurdo Ramirez? I've always liked Dimitri's chances against Zurdo because Zurdo is a big guy, solid guy, a former champion at super middleweight, now a very solid and statuesque light heavyweight. He's all those things, but he's a rather unremarkable guy.
He's a serviceable fighter, but an unremarkable one.
He beats Dominic Bosel the way I think he's going to beat Dominic Bosel, by way of knockout. I envision a fight between Dimitri Bivol and Zurdo Ramirez looking a lot like the Lenin Castillo fight from 2 years ago, looking a lot like the Craig Richards fight we saw ahead of what became the Canelo Alvarez fight. Dimitri Bivol can outbox this guy, even if he can't overpower him.
Yeah, Zurdo's a tall drink of water, but he's no cerebral fighter.
And you know, he can punch. He's not the kind of guy to where you want to let him hit you clean. He's not feather-fisted, but he's no Artur Beterbiev either. He had to go through the gears with Yunieski Gonzalez in his last fight.
I've talked about this fight already. I've talked about it in passing.
I've always liked Dimitri Bivol's chances against Zurdo Ramirez because Zurdo, he's a big guy, unbeaten guy, but he's also an unremarkable guy. Not the best resume for a former super middleweight champion, and certainly not the best resume as a light heavyweight contender. It's been a rather unremarkable run.
Bivol on points was and still is my prediction for that fight.
If they ever get it over the line, and they might, because now Zurdo Ramirez versus Dimitri Bivol is a much more high-profile fight than it was some time ago. This is the guy that beat Canelo Alvarez, the consensus #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. Dimitri Bivol has arrived.
Bivol versus Ramirez now has more of a profile as a fight than it did before.
Canelo Alvarez's legion of fans watched Canelo Alvarez falter at the hands of that same Dimitri Bivol. They might show up to support a Zurdo Ramirez in the hopes that Zurdo would succeed where Canelo Alvarez failed.
I think they're going to leave disappointed.
But you never know. Zurdo might surprise us. Dimitri Bivol certainly did this past weekend.
Light heavyweight division didn't have much of a profile before this past weekend.
But now it does. While Artur Beterbiev may be in possession of more alphabet titles than Dimitri, and while he stands a good chance of plowing through Joe Smith Jr. and collecting a third, Dimitri Bivol in many ways seems like the man to beat at 175 pounds.
Yeah, I'm sure there's still a lot of people out there that still like Artur's chances against him.
Right now, Dimitri Bivol does have more of a profile than Artur.
He's the man.